Hello, everyone. Kim Victoria here with a whole lot of colorful paper, tea-dyed paper, all sorts of papers. I realized that this week I needed to restock supplies, and I went nuts with the Easter egg die. And what I want to share with you today is some things that I discovered that playing around, trying different things like this messy looking paper and how that worked out. I also did some making rice paper. So what I want to do today is I want to share with you what I have made and give you some tips on using Easter egg dye. And I also did some tea dyeing and I combined the two. So if that's something that you're curious about, is what I discovered and some ideas that I played with and found that worked, uh, yeah, stick around and let me share with you what this was and the Masterboards and the faux rice paper and all those things that I made. And it won't take very long, but I did some things with napkins. Yeah, I spent a few days just making stuff because I was almost out. And so I think now I'm ready to start working on other projects. So let me go through this. I'm going to stack it up in a different way and go through it with you. Okay, so let's start with the die that I used, the Easter egg die. This is from PAS, PAAS, and they have this little color chart here. I did not add vinegar because vinegar is more of a mordant for the eggshells themselves. The paper doesn't need that. So I didn't worry about that. I just used some, kind of some warm water and let them soak really good and just kept stirring until it all dissolved. What they show you on the little chart here is not necessarily what you're going to get. So I'll be able to show you that. I do use some little tweezer things so that I can test things. So this was little wet spots and there, and that one goes with the yellow. And this purple looking one is actually orange. And there's that pink one. This one is a dark green and it makes a kind of a real pale green. So these are obviously ones I haven't used yet. And so the first thing that I wanted to do is I'm wanting to make a blue jeans journal, kind of a Western cowgirl kind of theme. And so I wanted kind of a blue jeans color. And none of these dyes were really appropriate in that sense. So I was going for something that was blue with a little hint of maybe a little purple in it. I don't know what order I did these too much at this point, but I combined the pink with the kind of lighter turquoisey blue because I also wanted some kind of purple. I just wanted to make lots of dyed paper. So let's just put it that way. So what I have here is the first, I think this was the first batch. And you can kind of see how I get pink and blue. It doesn't dye evenly, which is actually kind of fun. You get some variety. And I'll come back to what to do with these crinkly papers. Now, I did ask my husband Tom to make me a book press. So I will be able to put these in the book press. Let me show that to you. Okay, in case you have a handy person in your life, a book press is a wonderful thing to have. And he set me up with 8 of these wingnut kind of situations. And right now I'm pressing some flowers. So, but this is fantastic. This is a great way. I had him make this so that it would hold 8.5 by 11 papers. So it's really, really important that you have that much space in there. So actually this can hold 9 by 12 just. Okay. So those of you who have A4 size paper, you could go with this configuration, but you probably want to go a little longer. And in the United States, we also have legal size paper. And I wasn't thinking about that. It would have been really nice if I had had him make it so that it would hold legal size paper as well as some other kinds of art papers. So anyway, if you have a handy person in your life who can make you a book press, whoops, I've got my little bolts starting to fall out here. So let me screw this back on so they don't fall out. I'm going to have to add a little more glue on the back side so they don't fall out. And of course, I have 4 more wing nuts. Okay, so much for the book press part. So you could look at all the variety, really, especially on the edges. I also did experimenting with crinkling it up. Now, this was probably one where, yeah, this would be one while it was wet. I'd already put it in the dye bath and smooshed it up. You got to be really careful when you do that because, of course, the paper is very, very fragile. And then I put it back in the pan and just kind of gently would smooth it out again a little bit, but not too much. This one I'll probably need to iron. The book press generally doesn't take care of super smushed like this, but it's a wonderful texture. And just because it was smushed and puddled when I was drying it, it gets all these different colors. So that's a really cool effect. And here's one that had some little spots that were different. It's very interesting. You know, it's when you're dyeing paper, there's a lot of experimenting to do. You just and see, look at same dye bath, different color. Probably because I soaked these a little longer. And that is an interesting thing I found with the Easter egg dyes, is that when you soak the paper a little bit longer, you sometimes get these different colors. Also, the other thing to be aware of is cardstock. Now, this is cardstock that could have actually gone through the printer. So there's cardstocks that are only for crafting and they don't really go through a laser or an inkjet printer. Trust me, I've tried. You want to make sure that you get cardstock that is designed to go through your printer. And that can vary. You know, if you have a laser, you don't want to be putting something that specifies inkjet. So those are just some really important things to be aware of. But look at the interesting kind of color variances. And in some dyes, there's even more variances. Same dye bath, different paper manufacturer, completely different colors. Isn't that interesting? The way these fibers absorb the color or don't absorb the color. So interesting. So that is, so also whenever I do this, oh, here's a wonderful one. Look at look at that. I'm going to scan some of these. Tina on Frieda Friemel, she's from Germany. She just put up some free papers from her own experiments. I love that. It's such a good idea. So I'm going to scan the best of, and I will put those in my Buy Me a Coffee or Ko-Fi shops, and you can have this one for sure will be available. The other thing I always make sure to do now is envelopes. I grabbed some envelopes and look at the variety that showed up in the envelopes. I also have some of these security envelopes that these had a blue interior and they came out very interesting. And I thought I would double dye. I grabbed just these few sheets of tea dyed paper. I wanted to see what would happen. So I didn't get the result at all. Look at that. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so there is batch number 1. Then I wanted to try and get something that was more blue. And I had pretty much run out of water in my pan at that point. Oh, by the way, I only do one, you know, I like put a sheet in and take it out. I've also started putting in a sheet and put another sheet on top, another sheet on top, and I'll do 4 sheets and then pick them up as a group, drain them off, and set them out to dry. So, and so here's an image of my studio floor with a big tablecloth on it. and you can kind of get an idea of how I lay everything out. I turn the ceiling fan on, and so yeah, I had everything full. I had the shelves full, any counter space, everything got full. So I added the other blue. So I got some lighter purples, and then for some reason I started to get some other blues. I don't know why those colors showed up, but they did. I will also kind of drip leftover dye on some of the papers that are lying out there on the floor. And when I do these drips, the dye, I mean, it kind of merges out and it creates these different colors. So yeah, lots of really interesting stuff. And then these envelopes, they take on their own look. So some of these are going to be great for my blue jeans journal. All right, so that was one batch. And then I did some, and then I decided I needed to do some tea dyed. So I did make some tea. I used Tetley. It's just what I had. So let's see. No, that's regular. So this is the cardstock. And I did a little bit of when it was lying on the mat on the floor, on the tablecloth on the floor, I did a little bit of making it mountainous so that it would get these different effects. So I did a lot of different kinds of scrunching and wrinkling. So on this one, you can see I let it dry with these mountains and valleys. And again, you want to be very, very patient and careful when you're manipulating your wet paper because it tears really easily. So I have this interesting stripy pattern. I thought that was pretty cool, so I'm happy about that. And let's see, I did that one. I did that one in a stack of 3. So it was like this, all 3 of them. And I was thinking, my thought process was that by having 3 sheets of paper together and creating this mountain and valley fold situation, that it would help support each other. And the effect is more subtle on the other pages. I also did it lengthwise. And yeah, so there were 2 of those in a stack. So again, you get some interesting. The other thing that I have done more is when I stack the papers in the tray in the dye bath, I'll put one down and get it covered, and then I'll put one down and I won't wet the whole thing, and then immediately put another sheet right on top of that while there's still some white left, and put another sheet on top of that. So I create this kind of sandwich. And then when I pull it out of the dye bath, it, drips off and everything, but it will leave these kind of variegated spots. I like that effect. And then this is another example of having sheets on the mat on the floor and then dripping on the wet paper with more of the dye and letting it dry that way. So you get some very interesting drippy effects. So that's all fun stuff. All right, I don't think there was anything else in here worth mentioning. There's a lot of very plain stuff. There's some edging. Okay, so while I had the tea dye, I also have some yellow paper, yellow printer paper. So this is cardstock and this is the printer paper. Just a really nice bright yellow. So tone it down a bit. So some interesting effects there. So I didn't do a lot of those, but while I had the tea, I wanted to do that. And another fun thing is tea bags. Okay, that might not make sense. My husband and I drink mostly herbal teas. He especially loves peppermint tea. Really good for the stomach and digestion for him. And I love it too. So I went, I mostly have these very clean tea bags. So I put them in tea dye. And I got some tea color on tea bags instead of them being almost white, and got some different shades. So that was something different. So if you drink a lot of herbal tea and you're not getting some nice tea color, there's that. And I've got a little more to share when it comes to the tea bags. Let's get back to these. So I don't know what order I did the rest of these. I think, oh, that's right. I had still some tea in the tray. So I added the green dye to the tea. I wasn't sure what I was going to get, but I got this kind of mossy green. And what I did here was I tore one sheet of paper apart so that I could kind of dip it and see what would happen, what color I would get. So this was from mixing an Easter egg dye with some tea as really a beautiful mossy green. And then I also did it with some cardstock. This was just plain white cardstock. Look at that. Cardstock really absorbs colors differently from regular printer paper. And this was some yellow cardstock. So here's that yellow cardstock with just a little bit of tea dye. And this is quite a difference. It's really nice. Okay, so that's mixing tea dye with some, come to think of it, could have been the blue. Anyway, you gotta experiment. You just gotta experiment. So, all right, finish that off, cleaned that out. And when I was still shooting for some blues, so I got out another package of dye and went, well, what can I do if I do a plain blue? So they all tended with the papers. Look at these interesting variances. So interesting. And then I got some, this is all one dye bath, all these different colors. So interesting. So I added another tablet of blue. Well, I don't know. It's just, I wound up with lots of interesting colors, and your cardstock will always come out different. Legal length paper, the 8.5 by 14, that comes out different. It's just so interesting. So experimenting is super important. I did get some more blues, just very, from here to here, lots of different shades and colors. I decided I would get some nice greens. So this is the legal size paper, cardstock, and then all of these different, from one dye bath. Is that trippy or what? It's all one dye bath. And then I decided I would do something a little different. I took the paper and I used a big brush, a squirrel hair brush, one of those really cheap ones. And I just stroked the color on, turned it over and stroked it on again, set it aside by itself. So I did a few of those. And I thought, well, that looking so good, what if I daub? So these were all from taking that rough squirrel hair brush and just daubing, picking up the dye and just daubing it on. Fun, huh? Same dye bath, those same exact envelopes that just had the blue interior. It's like it bled through. Pretty cool. And I went wild. This was my last batch. We'll get to those. This was, I don't know which blue it was at this point, but it was one of the blues. I also tried some crystal dyes on one of the batches. So these will probably be really good for the jeans project. And then I decided I would get really wild. I crunched up the paper and let it dry, all crunched up. So that was kind of a challenge. I crunched it in the dye bath, And then I used a soft paintbrush to kind of lift it and get my hand under, lift it out, and put it down so that it could dry by itself. So that really looks like a mess. And I just went in and ironed. This one was the same. So what I did was I spritzed just a really light fog of water on it, and I put it between two pieces of cloth and ironed it. So you can see there's still texture there, but it's definitely, you can write on it. So this was ironed. So this scrunching it up and just letting it dry all scrunched up, some marvelous textures. So I don't know how these are going to scan, but I'm going to give it a try. Very organic. And this was one where I was kind of trying to shape it to get kind of a curvy shape. And this one I did horizontally with that kind of a little bit of a curvy shape. I have not ironed these yet. I have not ironed that yet. I wanted you to see how nubbly. So yeah, I really pulled it in very gently. So while I was at it, I was also doing, while all this stuff was out there drying, in between, I did some faux rice paper. So I was peeling the napkins apart, and you always wind up with those other layers underneath the design layer. So they're just, you've got your layers. But I thought, well, what would happen? What would happen if I just kind of daub a little dye on that? So you can kind of see how it bled through when it was all folded up. It bled through at different degrees from the original surface. But it gives you some really pretty delicate kind of look. And I have a couple that I have glued up to make the faux rice paper. And so this one has not been opened up yet. You can see how just kind of putting the paintbrush down, being very careful. Okay, so I think that's it for, yeah, that's it for the dyeing process that I did. Let me get into the faux rice paper now. But what I do recommend is, yeah, find out what color things are and have fun with it, because if you mix, say, tea dye with the yellow, you're going to get a really different kind of a muted yellow. And that was my idea with having some bath of tea and adding a color to it so that I would get something very, very muted. And I did get that with that dark green. I mean, I think that was a wonderful success for getting a dark green. So that's tea plus some Easter egg dye. So experiment, definitely experiment. And I was mixing colors and all kinds of stuff. Okay, onward. Okay, before I leave Easter egg dyeing completely, I'm going to put a link down the description box, and I'm going to try and put a little card in the upper right corner. So if you want to go see Natasa of Treasure Books Easter egg dye video, I'll link that. And also the other thing that I will link, and I will link it in the description box, and I will put a little card up there in the corner, is how to do the faux rice paper. So it gives you a chance to switch over to one of those if you want to learn how to do the basic stuff here. I'm just showing you some experiments and, just trying to give you some more ideas, right? So this, while I was waiting for paper to dry, I made faux rice paper. And that went on different shelves. So these are projects. They all kind of tie in with projects that I'm interested in doing. So these were some fun napkins, and they really are nice. You can kind of get an idea of the texture that comes out with it. So, And I did it on cereal bags, the cereal bag liners that come with cereal. So those are awesome for this project. I really like the cereal bags. The glue definitely doesn't stick. Everything peels off so nicely. And I do follow Natasha's instructions, which you can see is the pushing the edges up. So if you do go and watch her video on the faux rice paper, which you can always put in the little magnifying glass search bar on YouTube, you will go directly to it. So I did that on all of these, is kind of smoosh the sides so that they would peel up much easier. So I kind of seem to have wound up with various papers and things with a citrus feel to them. So I went ahead and did some citrus themed napkins that I came across. So there's that one. This is Okay, I'll set this one aside. I'll come back to that because I did something specific. And we'll come back to that. So, okay, and that one was also in that batch. So I was using for most of these, this is a very pretty tissue paper. And it strengthens the tissue paper quite a bit. It's really lovely. So I did this with just the thinned white glue. I was using Elmer's school glue and to that kind of that runny consistency that Natasha talks about. So this one's tissue paper. Let me see. Do I have any other? Oh yeah, this one's tissue paper. This one's tissue paper. Really pretty stuff. This is tissue paper. I just had these little pieces left. Well, those are fun. I'll just go ahead and fix them up. This is the pattern paper that I did just with the white glue, sewing pattern paper. And let's see, was there any other tissue papers? No, I think the rest are napkins. So this was just a little bit of the tissue paper. This was a napkin that had a gold. Now, while the glue was wet all over, I did get out some glitter. So I don't know if you can see any of that, but this napkin already had this gold foil kind of top on it. It was kind of with wedding stuff. Very pretty. So I added a little gold glitter to this one, just very lightly sprinkled it. That came out very nice. This one was a very lovely, delicate napkin. It had this kind of visual texture to it. So that's really pretty. I don't know what that's going to go in, but it will be nice when I do decide. You can see how that napkin started out. That one's nice. I have a lot of butterfly theme things happening. So I've got one of these napkins that was given to me. Very delicate. I have a whole pack of these napkins. So you get the shiny side, like Natasha says, you get the shiny side because this is adhered to the plastic while it's drying, and so it dries really slick and it comes out shiny. So let's see, I'll come back to those. So this is a napkin that was given to me that is very solid. There's some transparency to it, but I decided I would save this one for direct decoupage right on a piece of paper. But these napkins, now you can see I added a little seafoam green glitter to this one, but not this one. So you can see the difference there. Pretty cool. This also was a napkin. So my ocean themed journal, seashore, whatever, has got some components going. Okay, so then when I was working with those various green dye baths, that's when I started experimenting with just dripping color onto the white part of the napkins. This one I did add a little glitter to. Wonderfully transparent because it was the one white layer, but it's really strong. Beautiful colors. So I just kept going. You can faintly see, I don't know, yeah, you faintly see there's the butterflies So it was from one of the butterfly napkins. But yeah, that adding color, just dripping some of that green dye on. So pretty. You get this marvelous texture. I went a little heavier handed with the glitter on these two. So while the glue is wet, just a light sprinkling. I have not used glitter in any of my journals, so this will be an interesting diversion from what I normally do. And then I needed to mix up some fresh glue. And this time I added just a little bit of acrylic paint. So a little bit of brown and a little bit of yellow. I was kind of going for that tea or coffee brownish kind of tone. And you can see it best in one of the white napkins. So it's a little bit different color than if it's just like, not sure whether this one, yeah, you can see the difference. This was the brown and yellow acrylic paint, and this is just white glue thinned down on the pattern paper. I also did a piece of pattern paper with the brown glue. So this is with the white glue. This is with the acrylic colored glue. Very different. They started out the same. So it's really cool to do this kind of experimenting. So this one was with the brownish because these were all just white stripes, and now they've got a little tint to them. There's another piece of the napkin, and here's one of the butterflies. Let me grab the other one. So yeah, you can see that. So this is with the white glue, and this is with a tinted glue. So fun things to experiment with. And then, okay, so then it's like, okay, well, I've got these tea bags that I dyed. How about if I make tea bag rice paper, faux rice paper? Okay, why not? And they just glued together very nicely and you get some interesting kind of shapes. And I went, well, okay, that worked really well. How about if I just put it directly on a piece of just normal printer paper? So that's a kind of a neutral background that would, I could do all kinds of things with that. Well, that was so nice. How about masterboarding? So one of the things, now this idea comes from Margreth on Seven Plaza. She was suggesting, and I'll link that one too. She was suggesting that if you have any scrapbook paper that you feel you'll never use, and in her case, she was talking about foiled scrapbook paper, and I can't imagine ever using foiled scrapbook paper, but there's a few in my stash. So what I did was I used more of the opaque kinds of papers to cover up the foil. So I got neutrals on both sides. So either side could be, this is much more suited to writing on. This is a little less suited, but it would work great for, a fine point Sharpie or probably a ballpoint pen or something like that. But yeah, so this is the evolution of playing with, this is the same thing, using a variety of neutral papers that, some of my dyed paper. This is from an old lined paper pad. There were some book pages, the white part of book pages. So I just combined different neutrals and some more tea bags. So this was my tea bag experiments. Okay, so there's tea bag experiments. And I still had time to play, so this was another foil. So I haven't done anything to the backside. And this was just, I have a whole bunch of music paper and inked the edges and went in all directions. So it was my masterboard work while I was waiting for paper to dry. Let's see. Anything else? Yeah, I mean, this we got to play with this stuff, right? So the one last thing, I was given an old scrapbook kit, and it features clocks and watches. It's really pretty, all kinds of stuff. So I was at my sister-in-law's house and she gave this to me. She found it at a thrift shop. So I just spent the evenings. One evening I was cutting out all of the little bits and pieces and I went, I need some purple paper. So that's one of the reasons I was dyeing purple paper. Well, um, this was the cover sheet for the kit. And I went, well, it's a nice piece of cardstock. So I just took the paintbrush and brushed some dye on it. And so I'll be, cutting this into journal cards, tags, belly bands, pockets, whatnot. And then it will already have some of that color. So this is an upcoming journal project because I thought it was so pretty, but I needed paper to match. So I think I've got enough purples to match. I didn't have, I just had a few pieces in my stash, so I went, okay, I've got to dye some paper. So I've got the purples now. So I think that's everything I wanted to share with you today. I hope that there was something in here that inspires you to play with dye and play with scrunching paper and see what happens. The ironing worked great. But I did it between two pieces of cotton cloth when I ironed it, and I even spritzed the cloth a little bit with some water so that it would steam the paper and let it flatten out better. I think that's all the tips and advice and sharing I wanted to do. So if you have any questions or comments, um, anything else you'd like to know, or who else you might want to, what videos you might want to watch, and I will put my recommendations in the description box, and I put the cards up so that you could just change over to that. So anyway, I think I've got a pretty good stock for the moment. And so, yeah, thank you very much for being here. I hope you got something out of all this. Thank you for watching. And please join me in my next video. All right, stay creative. Bye bye.